speaker. He is an international award-winning speaker through Toastmasters. And we haven't had him speak at Launchpad for years. But lately he's been a speaker at lots of technical conferences. I see his name all over the internet. He is a fabulous speaker. I know you're going to enjoy this. Let's give a very, very warm welcome to Thom Singer.
So I was born into a family where I was the youngest of 4 boys. God save my mom. Now, at the time that I was born, my brothers were ages 10, 12, and 14, which meant that by the time I was 3, I lived in a house with 3 teenagers whose sole purpose in life was to torment me. Now, I don't mean to throw my brothers under a bus. My brothers are great guys. We have a great relationship now. But when they were teenagers and I was little, they had a little bit of fun at my expense. Was anybody the youngest child? We could talk afterwards. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So one of my earliest childhood memories is we used to rent a beach house for 2 weeks every year in Southern California. And we would move the whole family into this small little beach house that only had 2 bedrooms, which was actually a little small for a family of 6. It had a master bedroom for my parents, and then this tiny bedroom with 1 twin bed, which they put me in. And my brothers had to sleep in sleeping bags out in the living room. Now, as a person who is a little more aged and experienced, the bed in the private room, totally cool. But to a 3-year-old, what a bummer. It seemed like they were having a party out in the front room. Now, clearly, they had to put their heads on the rental house carpeting, so now it doesn't seem quite as great. But when I was 3, I loved that they got to be out there in sleeping bags. Because what's better to a 3-year-old than a sleeping bag? So in the mornings, I would go and I would play with the sleeping bags. I'd pretend I was camping. I would build entire tent cities. One time, though, I remember crawling to the bottom of a sleeping bag, and my brothers zipped me up in it. Then they rolled me up in it, and they proceeded to toss me to one another, kind of disoriented me. And then they told me they'd put me on the top shelf of the closet, and that if I moved, I would fall. I could break my arm. I could die. And then they left me and went and played on the beach. Now, I did what any 3-year-old would do. I freaked out. I started screaming for my mom. I'm crying. And of course, my mom did what a good mom does. She came running to my rescue and said, "Sweetheart, what is the matter?" And I said, "I am on the top shelf of the closet. Help me." My mom said, "Oh, honey, you're on the living room floor." And I was panicked. I said, "No, I am on the top shelf of the closet. The boys told me so." And she said, "Sweetheart, you have to trust me. Roll yourself out of the sleeping bag." And I did what my mom asked, and as I came out of the sleeping bag, I was on the living room floor. Now, I tell you this story because we all come into situations with our own perspective. Maybe someone told us something is a certain way. Maybe we observed it but didn't see the whole story. Maybe we just have that gut feeling. Oftentimes we think things are a certain way. And when I talk to groups, I always like to talk about the fact that when we talk about your network and your brand in the community, a lot of people have preconceived notions about what that means. People think they know, ooh, networking. And when people introduce me to crowds like you and they go, "Oh, Thom is an expert on networking," sometimes people go like, "Oh my God, they brought the networking guy in for an hour?" And they just cringe and they roll their eyes. Well, I would like to tell you all something. If you roll your eyes, I can see you. But a lot of people, it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert, a lot of people cringe at the idea of networking because networking has been given a very bad rap. So what I'm going to ask you to do is whatever perception you have of this topic, just set it aside because this topic is really, really important, especially for people who are looking for new jobs. Whether you're currently employed and looking for a new job or you've been laid off and you're looking for a new job, whatever the situation, all opportunities in life come from people. And so this whole idea of networking, it's not schmoozing, it's not bad. And I will tell you, as I go into today's talk, I was laid off throughout my career 6 times. I moved to Austin in 1991, and we all know that Austin has been a fantastic place to live for 25 years. Last week, I just celebrated my 25th anniversary living in Austin. But the Austin economy has done what for the past 2.5 decades? Yeah, she's got it. She even has sound effects. Shoo, up and down. And I worked for, actually, one in California, but then 5 companies here that either closed their doors entirely or shut down their Austin office. And every time I got laid off, I had a new job within 3 weeks, and I barely made an outbound call. People started coming up to me going, how in the world has this happened? You get laid off, 3 years later you get laid off, somebody hires you with a better job. How has that happened? One of my friends said, Tom, you're the only person I've ever met who gets laid off up. And it was because I was deeply engaged in whatever business I was in that company's community. Now, what your community is will change as you have a new job. It changes based on what part of town you live on, what you want to do for a living, what industry you work in. But you have to be thinking about, am I known in my community? So since I've been laid off 5 times, I actually have a gift for all of you. So I've written a couple books. One of them is called Some Assembly Required, a networking guide. Some Assembly Required, how to make, grow, and keep your business relationships. And I oftentimes, when I come and speak, would sell books in the back of the room, and 3 or 4 people would buy them. I thought, you know what, for this group, I'm going to give everyone a free book. So my friend Ron has books. He's going to start passing them out. You can take it, you can read it, you can give it to a friend, you can sell it on eBay for like $1. It doesn't get very much, trust me. I see people. Some Assembly Required, 94 cents. Great, good luck. God love you. So Ron's going to pass these out. He's also going to pass out a little sheet because I love feedback when I speak, because this is what I do for a living. I go and talk to groups. So I always ask people, if you like what we talk about today, just tell someone you know who plans meetings. And one of the reasons, somebody asked me, Tom, you do this professionally, they don't pay. Why in the world? They just asked me in the lobby, why do you come and speak to this group? And I said, because when I was just starting as a speaker, Kathy gave me the opportunity to stand in front of 50 or 60 people. And one of those people got a job and then hired me to speak at that company's conference. And so for that, I will speak for Kathy whenever she asks. Because although I've only been here 25 years, I'm a Texan, and you dance with the one who brung you. So what I'm going to really talk to you about is human engagement. When we talk about the idea of networking, people have, like I said, all these preconceived notions. And they always have a different idea of what it means. But the definition, if you look it up in a dictionary, the definition of networking is the creation of long-term and mutually beneficial relationships between 2 or more people, where everyone involved in that relationship will succeed more because of it than they ever would without it. Now, for those of you who thought, oh, I hate networking, when I talked about people who hate networking, you thought, that's me, yeah, gross. Do you hate long-term mutually beneficial relationships where you succeed more? Nobody does. People like that, and they say, well, that's not networking. Well, yeah, that's actually the definition that is in there of what networking is. People have capitalized on networking and taken it in different ways. They say it's schmoozing, it's bad. I actually spoke at a conference where the speaker before me, she was known as the anti-networking lady. And I'm in the green room listening to her speech to about 400 engineers. And she is up there. She has this room, mostly men, chanting at one point during her speech, I hate networking. I hate networking. And I'm in the back saying, who hired both of us? And how come I have to go second? So it was my turn, and I thought I have to talk about presentation skills. I have to talk about sales, some other topics that I do. And I thought, I can't find the meeting planner. I better go do what she hired me to do. So at this point in my speech, I talked about the definition. And the room was silent because I said, it's about human engagement. That's all we're talking about. So I stole this theory. You guys know whose that is? E equals mc squared? Whose is that? Of course it's Einstein. And I would never stand up here in front of Launchpad and let you think for a moment that I'm as smart as Albert Einstein. Because I am. However, I took his theory and I had stolen it. I'm giving it to you as something you can take with you anytime you have to go into a networking opportunity or a networking environment. And that is, engagement equals meaningful connections between 2 or more people. And that's all we're talking about. People who say they hate networking, it's just engaging with somebody. It's taking an interest in them. It's listening. It's not doing an elevator pitch. Now, we teach, and I know they teach it here, there is a time and a place where you have to be able to clearly and concisely tell people who you are. So I'm not dissing the idea of the elevator pitch. But you all know what I'm talking about with the elevator pitch, right? You teach this, right? The idea is if you get on an elevator with somebody on the 30th floor and you ride all the way down to the first floor with them, and all of a sudden you realize maybe they could hire you, you flick a switch in your back. Like if I think, oh, they could hire me to speak, I flick a switch and go, hi, my name is Thom Singer, I've written 11 books, I speak all over the country, blah, 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 just verbal vomit all over them. If that really happened in the elevator, and I was just like, here I am, here's what I do, here's why I'm great, what would you do when those doors open in the lobby? Run! I speak like 65 times a year, and I've asked this question to audiences. No one has ever said, take you to the Starbucks in the lobby and buy you coffee. I want to learn more. Every audience screams, run! So the problem is we're teaching people this important skill of being able to clearly and concisely tell people who you are, but we're not telling them, don't lead with it. This is the problem in networking. Everyone leads with flicking that switch. And, here's my elevator pitch. Here's who I am. Can you help me? Can you help me? You have to start the opposite way. And that is by asking questions and getting the other person to talk. They've done surveys, like on blind dates between like a couple, where they've sent them out. You know, you've seen these on reality shows. They put like a camera in the flowers. They float a microphone in the beer. They tape everything. And then afterwards, they go and they take a couple separately into soundproof booths and say, what did you think? The person who talks the most says, I loved him, I hope we get married and have 4 kids. The person who talks the least says, yeah, I'm not sure I want to see them again. So we have to remember when you meet somebody to engage them, you have to get them to talk. It's not about talking about yourself. So that's really, really key. But one of the things you have to do in a competitive job market, and I heard on the radio today that the job market, the numbers are actually lower. People in the job market are lower than they were in February 2009. And they said that, we've had this last, I'm not getting political, but they said that we've had this last 8 years. Nothing has happened. The numbers haven't gone up. They're actually lower than they were. There's still people out of work, so it's competitive. So what you have to do is you have to find ways to stand out. And when I counsel people and talk to people and coach people, one of the things people say is, well, I'm really good at my job. Well, guess what? Every employer out there expects you to be good at your job. That doesn't make you stand out. When we talk about what differentiates you, if the best you got is I'm good, or I do my job, I show up, that's what they're paying you for. We have to be thinking about how can we stand out. And one of the ways you stand out is how you make other people feel when they interact with you. So one of the things I tell people is, every time you have an interaction with a person, whether it's someone you're interviewing with, whether you're talking to Kathy afterwards, whether it's another job seeker who you talk to after this out in the lobby, ask yourself, did I leave their glass more full after talking to me? Or did I leave their glass a little more empty after talking to me? If you ask yourself that every time, and you're actually filling them up, spiritually, emotionally, humorally, funly isn't the word, but if you do that, then over time you will stand out, because there's so many takers out there who just want to talk about themselves and they're just focused on what their need is at hand, that the givers in the world are getting tired of it. And people just go the other way when people do that. The other problem is that we live in a world where everybody's busy, right? Who in this room is busy? Everybody's busy. If you were walking down the street on Congress Avenue later today and you ran into a former coworker and you said, oh my God, what's your first name? James. I said, James, how are you? What would be the first word out of James's mouth? I'm so busy. Who are you? No, you know him. He's a former coworker. Who are you and why are you talking to me? I left my name tag on from Launchpad. The first words out of your old friend's mouth would be, oh my gosh, I'm so busy. And then they would proceed to recite their calendar to you. They would tell you everything that they've been doing for the last week that makes their life so complicated and so busy. And then when they turn to you and say, how have you been? How do you respond? Oh my God, he's got it. Oh my God, I'm so busy. And then you recite your calendar. I'm so busy has become a competition in our society. It is a personal way to prove self-worth to yourself. If you can out-busy the next person, in your mind you can justify, maybe I'm a little better than that person. And so it happens all the time. You do it with your spouse. You get home from work, how was your day? Oh my God, it was so stressful. I sent out these resumes, I had these calls, I had lunch with an old friend. Oh my God, it was so busy. And your wife goes, oh yeah? Or your husband, oh yeah? I'm so busy too. And they talk about how their boss laid a whole project on them and all this stuff. One day, when my wife and I both work for ourselves now, but back when we both worked in corporate America, one night we came home and we were both complaining about how busy we were and all the work our bosses were giving us. And my wife looked at me and said, honey, this is a marriage, not a competition for who is busier. And it was like, wow, she's right. And ever since then, and that's been several years, I have started to notice that busy is a faux badge of honor that people wear. You're laughing. You know somebody like this, don't you? They are so proud to be so busy. So I started talking about this in my speeches only about 2 years ago. And as I started talking about it, I have never gotten more. And there's going to be a little sheet like what resonated with you. People say the busy thing. The busy thing. Oh my gosh. That's like the number one thing that resonates with my audiences. I get emails from people months later who I can't stop thinking about. 2 sisters were in my audience 2 years ago. This part of the speech about I'm so busy, they leaned over to each other and said, he's talking about mom. A couple months later, they wrote me and said at Christmas time, the holidays, they were going to have an I'm so busy intervention with their 78-year-old mother who lived in a retirement village. They said because anytime they called or they went to visit, all she could do was talk about how busy she was. Busy's not a competition. Everyone's busy, and it doesn't make you any better. Now here's the thing. People say, Thom, well, what do you say when you run into that coworker on the street? And they say, Thom, how have things been? My answer is, I'm so fortunate. And then I tell them why. And sometimes that has to do with my calendar items. I get to speak at Job Club. I'm going to be going to Houston next week to do some business development training for some lawyers. Next month I'm speaking for Charles Schwab, et cetera, et cetera. And they go, well, that's the same thing. You're just telling them why you're busy. I go, but when you frame it under I'm so fortunate or some other term, it causes people to lean in. It doesn't cause them to try to want to out-fortunate you. Now, and if they did, oh, what a bummer. Oh yeah, I'm more fortunate than you. No way, I'm more fortunate than you. Wouldn't that make the world better? So don't get caught up in this loop of busy. And I promise you, before the weekend is over, you're going to be like, oh my God, Thom is right. Because someone you talk to is going to go, oh, let me tell you. And you're going to be like, it's everywhere. Now, really quick, if you have a piece of paper, I'm going to ask you to do a real quick exercise. And we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to go through this a little faster than I normally do when I go into companies and do this. But I want to talk about the traits you admire in business professionals. Now, you all work in different industries. You've all had different experiences. So this is a personal list of traits you admire. And I'm going to give you the traits that I put on this list when I did this exercise several years ago. Just as an example, when you see mine, it's not like mine are the best. You can come up with totally your own. But the first one is I like people who are enthusiastic. I like people who are just excited about what they're doing. I like folks who want to master their career. They want to be the best at whatever they do. I like people who are authentic. They show up as the same person no matter where you meet them. Personally, professionally, spiritually, they are the same person. There's no closed parentheses on that. Huh, who knew? I like, I only speak like 60-something times a year. It cracks me up when I find a typo in the thing that's there for years. People who are open to learning. I like people who are willing to learn new things, which means I like all of you because you're spending the morning here trying to learn something new. I like those who want to be part of a solution. You know what I mean by that? So many people just show up and tell you all the problems that are going on in that department or with your job search or with your kids. Everybody just wants to tell you what's wrong. But very few people come to the table and say, here's how together we can make it better. I love people who want to be part of the solution. Last few, I like people who are tenacious. It doesn't matter what they're trying to solve. They get in there like a dog with a bone and they're not going to let go. They're going to solve this problem. God, I love people like that. I like people who are respectful of others. I think we've gotten to a stage where not being respectful is somehow acceptable in our society. So when people are outwardly respectful, I admire that. I like people who actively build relationships and serve their community. I like those who have what I call the generosity of spirit, meaning at the end of the day, they want to fill that glass with people they talk to. They want to be generous, whether it's with money or time or good vibes. And then finally, I admire people who are nice. Because let's face it, there's a lot of jerks out there. So just be nice. So those are my 10. So now I'm going to ask you to write down your 10 traits that you admire. And I'm just going to give you a minute. If you only get to 4 or 5, I'm not the good trait police. But just write down a few. And I want to talk about that then after that. So take about a minute to do that. All right, who has something that wasn't on my list that you'd like to share? And I'll be really honest, normally at this point I give away free books, but you all already got a free book. So pretend you get a prize in the flag.
Even though you said it's for business, I think it's still very important that you're caring of your family and your family's needs, having a good balance.
Absolutely. Having a good balance and a respect, even in business, for your responsibilities and your family, because that shows that you're going to have that responsibility back everywhere, right? That's a great one. Yes, ma'am.
I like people that inspire and challenge me.
Inspire and tell me why.
Because my point of view is just here, and sometimes when they challenge you, it makes you kind of go out of your comfort zone.
Such a great answer. She likes to be challenged and inspired by people and stretches herself a little bit. Yes, in the back.
I like people with good EQ, emotional quotient, people that have good situational awareness and are,
So explain EQ a little bit.
they're not just intelligent, but they're intelligent about the emotions and where people are coming from, and they respond to someone as a human rather than just from their own
Awesome. She
perspective.
admires people who have a good EQ. They recognize the humanity in the other people and they're aware of that. Yes, Roxanne.
Creative people.
Creative people, tell us why.
We're living at a time when there is a lot of exciting changes going on, and the creative people are the ones who are pushing us forward.
Absolutely, and there's been studies done that, like when you look at small children, like 98% of children under like 5 years old score like creativity through the roof, and 2% of people in the job world score creativity at a high level. So there's some huge disconnect. So creativity is so important. Someone on this side, sir.
My very first part-time job in the evening was filled with people who had a daytime job and were working at night. And typically they had kids in hospital and they were suffering these horrible things, and yet they were wonderful and cheerful and whatever. And I can't think of anybody I ever admired more because of their
So what's the trait that we're looking for? Just cheerfulness?
suffer cheerfully.
Suffer cheerfully. Oh, that's interesting. So even when they have a hardship, they still can put on a good cheerfulness to the world. Awesome. One more. Yes, right here.
I like a boss that's going to stick up for his people when they are doing what he told them in upper management
Yeah.
terms he gets on his case.
Yeah.
And he says that's, and he sticks up.
He owns it. He owns it and sticks up for his people. So his was he likes a manager who defends his people, especially if it's something he sent them out to do. When they come down, he doesn't throw people under the bus. That is great. So take a look at your traits, whether you have 8 of them or 10 of them. And normally when I work with people, I make them put these traits away until our next meeting, but we're only together for an hour. So put them away, pick them back out, and look at the traits and ask yourself, do I live by these traits 100% of the time? Are you living by the traits that you admire, the character traits? Always. I'll be honest, am I always tenacious? Kind of, but probably not always. Am I always respectful of others? I try really hard to be, but I drop that ball. Am I always generous? Am I always nice? I could go back to the other 5. Always? God, Tom, that's a big word. Ask yourself, do I live by these traits? Because I will tell you, part of building a network and a brand in your community is surrounding yourself with the right people who want to create those long-term and mutually beneficial relationships, who want to see you succeed, who get excited to see their friends succeed. They don't go, oh, she's broken out on her own, she started her own business, she's making $500,000 a year. Damn her. Oh, sorry, couldn't say. It's not that. They're thrilled that she broke out of the pack and is doing great things. So whatever traits you admire, you have to live by those, because you will attract people into your world who are a lot like you. I don't know why it is, but as human beings, we are drawn to people who are similar to us. Now, I am a huge proponent, and I teach this, it's very important, of diversity, because I really believe that we are better human beings when we surround ourselves with people who are different from us. So in your life, you should have friends who are of different races, different religions, different sexes, different ages. You should have friends who come from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, people who have a different sexual orientation. Different political beliefs. For God's sake, I see people all the time who go, if you're voting for X candidate, I'm unfriending you on Facebook. What? You only want to surround yourself with people who believe exactly what you believe? And I challenged somebody on this, and she said yes, because anybody who believes the other thing is awful. And I'm like, that's so funny, because I have a friend who believes the other thing, who says the same thing. And she goes, and we could never be friends. And she was proud of it. And I thought, how small are you if you just want to live in a bubble? And I don't want to care what side they like. If you go to a dinner party and everyone's voting for Hillary, or everyone's voting for Trump, or everyone's voting for Gary Johnson, invite different people to the dinner party. Diversity is a great thing. It makes us whole as people. But where the one area where there's no room for major differences is when it comes to character traits. Because Jim Rohn, the famous speaker, said, famously and almost overquoted, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with on a daily basis. Jim Rohn died a couple of years ago. I'm sure you've heard that quote from him before. But you know what? There's some truth to it. You're the sum of the 5 people. When it comes to your character traits, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So look around. Are the people you're spending the most time with having similar traits to you and maybe higher, better traits so that they're pulling you up? Or are they maybe pulling you downward? So I said this one time at local, it was in Austin, it was a local, luncheon. And there was about 200, 300 people in the room. It was tables. And I said, you are the sum of the 5 people who you spend the most time with on a daily basis. And this woman, like 3 tables back, right over here, really loud, goes, ah, shit, who? She said the word. The whole room laughed, just like you did. As a speaker, it kind of threw me off a little bit, because I said, you're the sum of the 5 people. And she said, ah, shit. Everybody laughs. I kind of got lost. Everybody was kind of awkward. Got back on track. Afterwards, I did a book signing. And I was selling books and all this, and I could see the lady waiting for me over on the side. She was waiting for me to finish my talk. And I thought, uh-oh. So when it was just her and I, she walked towards me and I said, so what was that about? She said, Thom, I was driving over here to this luncheon today, and I was thinking to myself, my God, I hang out with a bunch of losers. She said, Thom Singer, you just told 250 people that I am one. And we had a good laugh. I mean, she was funny about it, and we had a great conversation. But then she brought up an interesting point. She said, she was in her mid-50s. She said, you know what? It's harder to make friends in your 50s than it was when you were younger. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she had a really good point. She said, when you're in elementary school and junior high, you have class every year. There's new kids in your class. They mix you up. Get to junior high and high school, it's classes every hour. You're going to different classes, so there's new people, and you're joining clubs, and you have interests. You're going to after-school activities. Then you go to college, and everybody's new in the freshman dorm, and you're meeting all these new people. And then you get involved with a sports team or a fraternity and sorority or some other organization. And all of a sudden, every year, there's new people. Then you get a job, and it's all the new young professionals coming into the company. And you're going to training, and you're meeting all these new people, and you're bonding and sharing experiences. And then you get married, and all the young couples hang out together. And then you start having kids. And what do your kids have? They have friends. And what do the friends have? Parents. And so you start meeting all those people. She goes, then you look around, you're 50 years old, and you have your group. And you're not being exposed to as many new people. And so we had a long conversation about that. And she said, Thom, how do you become a friend? And my answer was, you go out and be one. Go out and be a friend. Take an interest in people. Ask questions. Listen. Help them. Pick them up when their car's in the shop. Do the little things. And all of a sudden, if you make other people feel like a priority, they're going to have that. So you need to live by the traits that you wrote down, because you will draw people with similar traits to you. If one is generosity, and you know someone who needs a ride, and you give them a ride, guess what? They might help you in the future. Or, I think the real givers in the world, I think they're observers. I don't think you have to give to her for her to give to you. I think if you give to her, he sees you. If he's a real giver, he sees that you have that generosity of spirit. So you have to live by those traits. And as you talk to people and build relationships, you can't just live on this superficial level of what's your name, what type of job are you looking for, where did you work before, how long have you lived in Austin? It's all superficial. And in our world, we live at that. We spend a lot of time trying very hard to stay at the superficial level. But if you want real relationships of people who will walk into their boss and say, my gosh, we have to interview this lady, she is fantastic. We all want friends like that, right? Who will go in and say, we have that opening, we have to hire my friend. But a lot of people won't do it because they only know you superficially. So you have to get to what Professor Adam Grant from the Wharton School calls uncommon commonalities. Now, Adam Grant wrote a great book called Give and Take. It was a bestseller for a couple of years. And he has this, like, chapter, I don't even remember, 6 or 7, like this one paragraph on this thing called uncommon commonalities. And Adam Grant's a pretty big deal. And earlier this year, he and I spoke at the same conference. I was the opening keynote speaker, and he was the closing keynote speaker 3 days later, but I stayed as the master of ceremonies. So I was going to get to introduce Adam Grant. But I realized I told the audience his story. I hadn't thought ahead that, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't, maybe that's part of his speech. So when he was getting mic'd up, I pulled him aside and I said, Adam, I do this thing in my opening speech. I do it all the time. I quote you. And he was proud that he was quoted. I mean, everybody wants to be quoted. Read my book. Go quote me. It's great. But I said, Adam, I talk about uncommon commonalities. And I explained how I use it to the audience and the examples I do. And he said, you're a really close reader, aren't you? So this book has been a bestseller for 2 years. Nobody has ever talked to me about uncommon commonalities. He goes, I think it's a great thing. But nobody ever picks up on it. He goes, go, use it. Tell everybody. So I have Adam Grant permission to tell you this story. And what uncommon commonalities are is when you find those things that you two have in common, that you don't have in common with everybody at the superficial level, that's where real relationships get built. So, we spend so much time, oh, where are you from? What do you do? we don't get deep enough. We have to find those things at our core that we have in common with people, and you're not going to have it with everybody. So the example I like to use with audiences is, does anybody, and it's okay to raise your hand and say yes. People are like, oh, I can't say I watch television. Does anybody watch television sitcoms? Yeah. So if I was to ask I love the half hands. Yeah. If I was to ask who likes television comedies or sitcoms, and I was to say who likes Big Bang Theory or Modern Family, every hand goes up in the audience. He's like raising 2 hands. Woo! And the reason is everybody watches those shows. They have been the 2 top-rated sitcoms for the last 5 years, and combined, they have won more Emmys than anybody else for half a decade. So that is common. That's not uncommon. But if I was to ask, who loves The Office? Oh, and I don't mean The Office with Steve Carell. I mean the original The Office from England with Ricky Gervais. Who likes that show? Couple of hands go up, right? Not everybody's hands go up. If I was to put you 2 together to talk about why you love the original The Office, would you just talk for an hour? Probably. Because the rest of us would be like, what are they talking about? People like Ricky Gervais was in The Office before Steve Carell? They didn't invent that for American television? What? But the people who love the show, they'll go on forever. I've never seen the Ricky Gervais version of The Office, but I've been in conversations where people are just like, it's an uncommon commonality, and those people can find something deep and in common. So when you start talking to people, you have to get off the surface and look for things. And when you find something, ask more questions. Find that. I got hired by a guy. I was at a conference of meeting planners, which was a great place for me to be. And at lunch, I'm sitting next to this person. He's much younger. He works for a company that does some big meetings, though. I'm being very nice to him. And it's very superficial. Everything I'm talking about, he really doesn't care. He doesn't want to be sold to by a speaker. So I'm being respectful, but I asked him where he's from. And he said he's San Francisco. And I said, oh, did you grow up there? And he said, yeah, I grew up in the city, which is it's only 800,000 people in the city. That's rare. And I said, oh, you grew up in the city. Whereabouts? And I live in Texas. So he's like, whatever. He's just answering the questions like whatever. He goes, out kind of by the beach area. And I go, oh, really? Where? And I go, oh, my brother lives in West Portal. And he goes, what? He goes, I grew up in West Portal. And I said, what street? And he said, like Westchester. And I go, no way, my brother lives on Ulloa. They back up to each other. And he goes, no way. And he goes, which end? I go, the end near, I don't remember the name of the street, Smith Street. And he goes, really? And I said, yeah, do you live on the mountainside or the beach side? And he goes, beach side. I go, my brother lives on the mountainside. How many houses in? 3. No way. He goes, your brother have like white gray hair and 3 little kids? Well, my little kid nephews aren't little kids. By this point, they're like high school and college age. But this guy's like 27 or 28. So when he was in high school, they would have been little kids. And he goes, no way. He goes, your brother used to yell at me for playing basketball after midnight on a school night with my friends because my parents had put a sports court in the backyard. And it's funny because my brother's the nicest guy you would ever meet. I can't imagine him yelling at anybody. So I'm texting him. Like, oh, this kid. My brother goes, oh, you're sitting next to Jason. And he goes, tell Jason I'm sorry I used to yell at him. Yvette made me. So this guy and I spent the whole afternoon together, and his company hired me to come in and speak at one of their meetings. Now, would that have happened if I just said, where do you live? San Francisco. Oh, I love the city. We found an uncommon commonality because I've never met anybody whose house backs up to my brother's ever again. Look for those uncommon commonalities and dig for them. And when you find it, that's where things happen. But let's face it, in addition to being busy, you're also distracted. So when you meet somebody, it's great to get them talking, but sometimes that's an investment, right? To talk to another person, you've got to invest. And we all know you're not going to have a love connection with everybody. So sometimes it's like, oh, why do I want to talk to them? I could be doing something so much more important like Pokemon Go. There's so many distractions that are happening right now. So my father, my dad, if he was still with us, he would turn 102 years old next month. He was born in 1914, and he passed away at the very end of 2013. He lived 99 years. Now, before I go on with this story, I can see it in your faces. You're all thinking, wait. If that guy's dad would be 102, how old is Tom? I turned 50 years old just last month. My dad was 52 when I was born. And if he was still with us and he came up and met all of you, he would tell you that I was a surprise. You guys know what a surprise is? That is an accident that worked out really good because he liked me. But I talked to him before he passed away a couple years ago, and I said, Dad, what were the biggest changes? Because think about it. He was born 11 years after Kitty Hawk. Last time I gave this speech, somebody who was more of a millennial came up and said, I don't understand what's Kitty Hawk. You all know what Kitty Hawk was. Wright brothers flew an airplane for the first time. I now have to clarify, apparently. My dad was born 11 years after Kitty Hawk, and he died 2.5 years ago, right? So he saw the most amazing changes that I think any human could have ever lived through. And he was with it up until the end. And I asked him, I said, Dad, what are the biggest changes you've ever seen in people? By the way, wasn't he cute? I said, Dad, what's the biggest changes you've seen in people? And he said, Tom, people haven't changed at all. And I argued with him. I said, oh, yeah, they have. And I started citing all these things, and he argued back, said, people haven't changed. The tools we use to communicate have changed. And he goes, I watched it happen with radio, and then with telephones, and then with TVs, and then with mobile phones. He goes, and then the smart computers, and then the smartphones. He goes, the tools we use to communicate with each other have changed. And we've bought into that at a level that we think it's changed us. He said, but this was very profound for an old 99-year-old guy. Go read the Bible. Now, he wasn't like sending me to catechism or anything. He just was saying, go read the stories in the Bible. Written 2,000 years ago. What are the stories? It's not about religion. What are the stories? Lust, greed, wars, famine, politics, business. He cited off all the different stories in the Bible between human interaction, human engagement. He said, now go turn on the 6 o'clock news. What are the stories? Oh, it's lust, it's greed, it's infidelity, it's business, it's wars, it's government. People haven't changed at all. The tools we use to communicate have changed. So I was playing cards with him on one of my last visits to him. And he was a really good card player, and he was really fast. We played this game called Spite and Malice. Sometimes people are familiar with it. It's really fast-paced. You block the other person. You can block him, kind of kill the game. And he loved doing that. But did I mention he was 99? So when it was his turn, he'd look at my pile and his pile. He'd look at his cards and all this. So I did what any of you would do. I took out my phone. And I started looking at what was going on in the world, because he was taking a long time, and there's stuff. I'm busy. There's stuff, right? So I started checking Facebook. I mean, people could be on Facebook saying, I saw Thom Singer speak today. They could be tweeting something like, Thom Singer was the best speaker we've ever had. You could go tweet that if you want. They could be inviting me to come speak at their event. And I said, Dad, he said, Thomas, put that away. And I said, Dad, you don't understand. We live in the information age. I have to be connected to people. If they're trying to contact me now, they expect me to get right back to them. He goes, really? I'm going to go take a nap in 20 minutes. Get back to them then. You don't have to pull your phone out all the time. And he told me, he goes, you've written books on this stuff. I said, Tom, when you're with people, choose to be with people. God, you got to keep being schooled by the 99-year-old. But he's right. When you're with people, choose people. Have you ever been at a networking function or a business function, and maybe 3 people are talking, and these 2 start having a conversation where they're having a little bit of an uncommon commonality, and the 3rd person pulls up their phone and starts doing this? Have you ever had that? Have you ever seen that? What do you think of that person? Rude. Once again, I've never had an audience say, multitasker, I want to be just like them. Rude is what every time somebody answers that question. So if you're sitting there talking and someone pulls out their phone and they start doing this, everybody answers that that's kind of rude or disengaged or disingenuous or not connected. So I ask you, what do you call it when you do it? Because we all do it. I can see a couple of you went like, ah, I've done it. You know, it's like you have a phone in the pocket, it buzzes, and you're like, I must look because it has buzzed. God, I can't stop myself. The fact is that there's a time and a place to be on your phone, and there's a time and a place to be engaged with people. And we have to remember this over and over, because we get seduced by these phones because the buzz, things are going on. It could be that job offer, I better look. If you're at an event and you have to check your phone, walk down the hall 20 feet. Check your phone. That sends a message back to everybody that I have something important, I'll be right back to our little community. But if you're standing with the people, even if you're not in a conversation, if you're right next to the coffee and donuts, and you pull out your phone, you're telling everyone within 15 feet that they're the loser, and that the cool people are somewhere else. We have to remember it. I have a rule with my kids. No screens at the table. Restaurant or home, if there's a meal happening and 2 or more of us are sitting together, there's no phone. You know who the biggest offender of that rule is? Why does everyone say you? It's my wife. But the kids will say, Mom, or if I do it too, they'll be like, no screens at the table. We're only here for 10 minutes. Do that simple thing. When you're with people, choose people. If you have to check, excuse yourself and walk away just a little bit. And be curious about the people who you're with. You're choosing to be with them. Be curious. Ask a lot of questions. Hollywood director Brian Grazer wrote this great book called The Curious Mind. And from the time he was a mail boy at the movie studio until now, he is like Ron Howard's partner for all the movies that Ron Howard directs. They're like the biggest production company, director, and producer team in Hollywood. The entire 40-year journey, every single day, he meets with somebody and asks them questions as if he was interviewing them. And he started in the mailroom, and he would interview producers. And this. Now he interviews Oprah and Obama and people like that because he has access to them because he's Brian Grazer. Be curious about everyone you encounter. Ask them, how did you get into this line of work? What is it you wanted to do when you were a kid? What is it that you want to do next? Because we no longer just have one career. Most of us will have 4 or 5 different careers. So the fact that you're looking for a job, that's great. But what do you want to do next? What do you want to do after that? And I don't even have time to get into the whole world of social media. I mean, that could be an hour-long talk unto itself. There are so many places that everybody tells you have to be, but I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of noise on the internet. And all it does is suck you away from the people that you should be choosing. Now, I'm not saying don't be there. I love all the social media tools. I'm going to be tweeting about this later. I asked my friend Ron to take some pictures of me. I'm going to get those, and I'll put them on Facebook. Here I am with the job pad. Woo, launch pad. I think they're great. However, the one thing you have to have, and I know that Kathy's group has talked to you about this. I know that this is not news. But if you're a grown-up with a job or who wants a job, you have to have a vibrant LinkedIn profile. And by vibrant, I mean it's more than your name, your photo, and where you went to college. It has to be filled out. It has to tell a story of who you are and what you do, because people are using LinkedIn. And when I speak to recruiters, and I spoke to a whole audience of recruiters a couple years ago, and I said, does anybody not use LinkedIn? And not a hand went up. They use it. They go looking. They use LinkedIn as the way to prejudge people. Recruiters used to call people in their network and say, hey, I'm looking for a programmer. Who do you know? And they'd get a list. And that's how they did it. Now they put in what they're looking for and what the things are that they want, and they get a list from LinkedIn. So you have to have a vibrant one. A couple years ago, a person I knew pretty well, worried about getting laid off. It was during the recession. He wanted to have a talk with me because I know a little bit about this stuff. And one of the things I did before I met with him on the phone, because he lived out in California, in Silicon Valley, one of the things I did is I looked him up on LinkedIn. And I looked up to see about his profile. And you know what? He had one of those lame profiles. No photo, had his name, where he went to college, the company he worked for, and he had one friend. And that friend was his brother. And I knew this because I'm his brother. And I'm like, how do you live and work in the Silicon Valley and do that? And he said, I don't know that this stuff matters. So we had a nice conversation. And about 5 or 8 months later, he never did get laid off, but 5 or 8 months later, I saw on LinkedIn that whoop, he had a new job. So I called him and I said, hey, I just saw that you got a new job. By the way, I looked at his profile. It's all filled out. He had like 400 friends. He had like really good summary of who he was and what he did and why it was so great. I said, how'd you get the new job? And he goes, a recruiter. And I said, how did the recruiter find you? And he said, LinkedIn. And I said, what? And he said, LinkedIn. And I said, so the recruiter found you on LinkedIn because you filled out this profile. And he goes, yeah, because I actually hired a career consultant for like that much money. And they told me that having a LinkedIn profile would be a great idea. Hello, I did it for free. It matters. Don't sell your LinkedIn profile short. Make sure that it's vibrant, it's clear, that it talks about, that it uses the keywords of what your job expertise is. Absolutely, I could do a whole hour on just that, but that's what I leave people with in the online networking world. It's all good, but LinkedIn done right can be the great piece. So I got to start wrapping up here. Only about 10 more minutes. You're creating a brand. And lots of times people tell me, Tom, I'm not a brand. I'm a person. Coca-Cola's a brand. Nike's a brand. Southwest Airlines, that's a brand. I'm a human being. Well, yes, but you're a human being that has a brand. And if you've never thought it before, You have a brand in this community, in your work community. You have a brand because a brand, the best definition I've ever heard from a marketing person, what is a brand? A brand is a promise of how you will behave, period. People have been watching and judging you throughout your whole career. You have a brand. If you haven't taken ownership to cultivate that brand, it doesn't mean you don't have a brand. If you've never thought about your brand, it doesn't mean you don't have a brand. Because a brand is what other people perceive you're going to do in situations. So you have to take ownership of it. In 1997, Tom Peters, famous business author, wrote an article for Fast Company magazine called The Brand Called You. And in that article, 1997, he said, the job world has changed and will never come back. People will switch jobs more often than ever before in history. They'll switch entire careers, and their opportunities will come from people who they've known throughout their life. So keeping in touch with the people who you worked with from your first job to your last is more important than ever. But he wrote this in 1997. In 1997, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no LinkedIn, there was no Instagram. None of that, Snapchat, none of that existed in 1997. Email was just becoming a common business tool when he wrote this. So what he said you had to do is you had to send handwritten notes. You had to attend conferences. You had to invest in finding out about people. You had to help them along the way. Every time you saw someone in need, you had to connect the dot because someday you were going to be in need. Fast forward to today, there's no reason you can't do this. The tools exist and they're all free. You can keep in touch with people. You can build that brand called you by taking ownership. And the way you have to do it is you have to follow up with people like your life depends on it. Every single person you have an informative coffee with had dang well better get a handwritten note from you that says, thank you for giving me the time to talk about my job search. If you're not doing that, why in the world would they think of you later? Do you know how many people call me and say, Tom, I want to pick your brain. I'd love to become a speaker, or I'd love to write a book, or I'm looking for a job. And we go out for coffee, and I never hear from them again. Never a thank you, and never, hey, I found a job, your advice helped. Maybe my advice doesn't help. But the truth is that you have to thank people and follow up with people as if your life depends on it, because it does. If you don't own stationery and a pen, go stop at the stationery store. I think they still exist. Stop at the stationery store and buy one on your way home. Because today you will meet somebody who you will have a great conversation with. And if you sent them a note that said, boy, you gave me a great idea. You gave me a great idea at the launch pad. Thank you so much for the time. Whether it's one of the volunteers or it's one of the other job seekers. That matters. If you got a note next week in the mail that said, hey, Carol, that conversation we had made my time at Launchpad totally worth it, how would you feel? She'd feel great if somebody said that to her. You know what? Why would you cheat people out of feeling great? Thank people who are helping you along the way. Let them know how the job search is going. You don't have to do it all by handwritten note. Email is a great tool. And there's a time and a place where a handwritten note works and doesn't. People go, oh, well, they give me their card and it only had an email address on it. Okay, you can send an email. But are you making sure that follow-up and gratitude are your mantra? And I say this really harsh, and sometimes people go, wow, you're really harsh about that. Am I following up with people? And I say, the person who comes up and says that accusatory to me is usually like the worst follow-upper in the world. Yeah, I'm harsh about this. Why did I get laid off 5, 6 times and every time get a better job in 3 weeks without really making an outbound call? It's because that was my mantra. Every single week throughout my entire career, not so much now because my life's a little different, but when I worked in marketing and sales in Austin, every Friday I never left the office without sending 10 handwritten notes. People I met at networking events, the people who referred me business, someone who I knew their birthday was coming up. I couldn't leave the office on Friday for 10 years without sending 10 handwritten notes. That's 500 notes a year. I kept a box under my desk when I would get a handwritten note from somebody thanking me or saying nice to meet you. You know how many I used to get? 30 a year, give or take. Send 500, get 30. So what? I didn't need to get 500. It wasn't a competition. It was about building that brand and that reputation. And I still meet people. I'll go and speak at a company, and someone who I met 10 years ago goes, hang on just a minute. I'll run to their office, come back with a note dated like 2005, where it just said, hey, it was a pleasure to meet you at the networking club. And I'll be like, why do you still have this in your drawer? It's the only one I've ever got. Make that your mantra, and it will pay off. So as I wrap us all up here, I've talked for Yeah, Ron's going to pass out the little the Give Tom feedback forms. You don't have to put your email on it. If you put your email on it and want to be on my mailing list, great. I really just want what was the part that really resonated. There's other stuff on there that's entirely up to you. But Ron's got those in the back. But here's the thing. Everything I talked about for the last 50 minutes will help your career. If you do it, if you embrace it, if you really look at people as the key, you're going to have more success. But here's the trick. This isn't just about business. And here's why. Because anytime you have a discussion or a relationship or a friendship with another human, another carbon-based life form, the person on the other side of that connection, they have in their life their own stuff. You guys know what I mean by stuff? Sometimes it's good stuff. They got promoted. They got a new job. They sold their company for $3.7 million. You know, yay. Celebrate that. You know, they're getting married. They had their first grandchild. They're taking a round-of-the-world cruise. When you know somebody has good stuff happening, send them an email, buy them a bottle of champagne, take them out to lunch, whatever is appropriate, and say, wow, that is so cool that you got your dream job. Because when you share the good stuff with people, that's how we bond. Sharing experience. People are experiential. When we share an experience, you don't have to be there. Just by talking to them about the good experiences, that's how we build relationships. But here's the thing. Sometimes bad things happen to really good people. And I'm talking about people in your business network, not your best friend, your brother, your cousin, your next door neighbor. I'm talking about people who are your business acquaintances. Sometimes they go through some rough stuff, right? They get divorced, they get fired, their company goes bankrupt, they get sued. Maybe they're dealing with aging parents and everything you go through when you have to deal with that. Or their spouse gets sick. Or worse, something happens to one of their kids. When that happens, we don't know what to say. So do you know what we say? Nothing. We see them, and I'll tell you, when you're part of a community, people talk, and it's not gossip. We are wired to tell stories. We cannot help ourselves. People talk. And so when someone's going through a rough time, everyone in the community who kind of knows them knows exactly what that rough time is. And it's not gossip, it's not bad, it's just human nature. But the problem is when people know that you're going through a rough time and they say nothing, it's a huge disconnect. And I know this firsthand. Because when my youngest daughter was born, her name is Kate. And before I tell you this story, let me tell you, today she is 14 and she's fabulous. But life didn't start off that way. When Kate was born, she was born with a medical condition where the bones in her skull had fused together in the womb, and they misdiagnosed it. When she was born, her head was a little funky looking, a little oval. We asked about it. The doctor said, oh, heads are funny. They get caught under a rib. It'll round itself out. And those of you who have kids know that they're always measuring their heads. Her head was growing, but it was getting more deformed, kind of an elephant man thing. And the doctor goes, no, it's going to be fine. No, it's going to be fine. At almost 5 months old, he said, maybe we should do a CAT scan. Really? We think so too. But he said, you know, there's this thing where the bones confuse. Don't really worry about it. 80% of the time it happens to boys. I think she's going to be fine. Yeah, well, Kate loves to buck the odds, no matter what they are. So 80% of the time it happens to boys. Her CAT scan came back positive for a thing called sagittal synostosis. Her skull was fused shut from soft spot to soft spot, which meant her head would never grow this way. And the way the head grows is the brain grows really fast in babies and it just pushes the head out. And as the little bones get pushed apart, they think, oh, time to go back together. And your whole head goes like this until you're 15 years old. Most of it happens in the first 3 years, but it keeps going until you're 15. In her case, it would never go this way. It would only go that way. They told us we had two options. We could do nothing and raise a kid with a pretty seriously limiting social handicap, the elephant man type thing going on. Maybe some brain damage from the pressure that was happening in her skull. Or, and this is 5 months old, by the time she's 6 months old, we could do surgery where they would remove the cap of her skull. And then most likely the bones would grow back together. What part of that was unsettling? Most likely. We decided we had to do what was best for Kate. So we started looking as quick as we could for the right option. At the time, there was no Dell Children's Medical Center in Austin. We had to look outside of Austin for the best hospital and the best doctors. But I had a very high-profile job as the director of marketing for one of the biggest law firms in town. And I was a one-man marketing department for the Austin and Dallas offices, and we had a lot of stuff going on. And I had to do my job. I couldn't lose my job. We needed the insurance. So I was working, and I was working hard while my wife was flying with Kate to different cities to meet these surgeons to decide what was the best thing. And because we sponsored a lot of things, and because I had this skill, I was often asked to introduce the speaker or to be the master of ceremonies, or because I was the marketing department, I had to work check-in at the door. Hundreds of people would show up at these events that we sponsored or that we put on, and during that 3 or 4 week period while this was all starting to unravel, everyone in the tech community knew what was going on. They didn't all know me, pretty much everybody knew. And when I would be at an event, I could see it in their faces. People would look at me and go, and they didn't know what to say. Even people I knew pretty well would just walk to the bar and get in line as if they hadn't seen me. It was like I was a ghost. I don't blame them. It's not their job to be caught up in my stuff, right? But there were other people, oh man, there were other people who'd walk up and they'd give me a bear hug. They'd pat me on the back. They'd say things like, Thom, my church group prays for Kate every day. How nice is that? One guy came to me in a place, ballroom type networking event, took me into the corner. He said, Thom, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in a higher power, but I don't pray for your daughter. He goes, and I don't know why your family has to face this. He goes, but I want you to know I care. And then he hugged me. And as he released the hug, he said, and I live in your neighborhood, and I run by your house. And every morning when I go by your house, I send good vibes towards Kate. Oh, it's right. I would wake up in the mornings and I would look out the blinds and I'd expect to see this guy running by going like this. People made dinner for us. They babysat our kids so Sarah and I could go out to dinner and just talk like grown-ups. I tell you this story not because you're ever going to need a pediatric neurosurgeon. I tell you this story because I will never forget the people who did those little things, who just saw me. In India, they call it namaste, which translates to, I see you. When people are going through a rough time, they need to know that someone sees them, and they'll never forget you for it. During this time, about, she was almost 6 months old, we'd settled on a doctor. My phone rang at 1:30 in the morning. Now, we don't keep a phone in our room, so I had to run downstairs, get the phone, I answer it. Person in my network identifies himself, and I will tell you this was not a 1:30 in the morning kind of friend. I'm like, yeah? He says, Thom, I just got off the phone with my first cousin. Yeah? And he said, Thom, my first cousin is one of the top 3 pediatric neurosurgeons in the world. I've been trying to reach him for 2 weeks because I wanted to make sure that you had all the questions answered at a personal level before you made your decisions of what to do, that you would have everything. And I said, I'd read about your cousin. When he told me who he was, we couldn't even get in to see him because we should have been diagnosed at birth. He had 6 months. We were diagnosed at 5 months. You can't get into him for 2 or 3 months. We couldn't get an appointment. And he goes, Thom, he's expecting your call at noon Pacific time tomorrow. So the next day, I clear my calendar at 2 o'clock, 12 Pacific. I call Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. I ask for Dr. Meltzer. They patch me through. His assistant says, Mr. Singer, Dr. Meltzer's expecting you. Patches me through him. I spent the next hour on the phone with one of the top 3 pediatric neurosurgeons in the world talking about the surgery, about what we decided to do, and he had come up with a brand new way, or had fine-tuned a brand new way to do the surgery that I had read about, but it was still new. And he said, you should consider this. And I said, well, it seems experimental. And we got talking about it. I said, we've already settled on a doctor, and I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, Thom, you're my cousin's friend. Don't settle. I want to see Kate tomorrow. My wife and Kate got on an airplane to San Diego the next day. And I also said to the doctor, this new surgery, how many times have you done it? And he said 13. God, I wanted him to say 497. But the next day, Kate and Sarah, my wife Sarah, flew to San Diego. My wife called me that night, and she said, get Jackie, our 5-year-old, and get to San Diego. He wants to do the surgery on Friday. He's the first doctor to show any urgency. If you're on board, let's do this. Wednesday, Jackie and I flew to San Diego. And on Friday morning, at 7:30 in the morning, we handed Kate over to the doctors at Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. And 4 hours later, they called my cell phone and they said, Kate is going to be fabulous. Today, Kate's 14 years old. She is beautiful. Oh, interesting. That's an old picture. In that picture, she's like 11. Today, Kate is 14 years old. She is beautiful and she is smart. She is starting high school this month at the Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders. Kate is a leader. Her head is nice and round. She's beautiful. This is the picture that's supposed to come in. She's beautiful. She's smart. She's precocious. If she was here right now, she'd sit next to you and she would say, you know, when I was a baby, they took a knife this big and cut my head off. They've seen my brain. She has absolutely no problem with the story of her life. She tells people all the time. In fact, when she was in first grade, she made a little boy cry. They were having a little argument on the playground of who was the smartest kid in the class. The girls were all behind going, Kate's the smartest. The boys were like, Ryan's the smartest. Kate's the smartest. Ryan's the smartest. Kate got frustrated, looked at the little boy and said, how do you even know you have a brain? They have seen mine and there are photographs. Kid burst into tears. My wife picks Kate up and the teacher goes, Kate has a great imagination. And my wife goes, no, there's photos. You want to see? No. I tell you this story not because you're ever going to need a pediatric neurosurgeon. I tell you this story because in your life, in your career, in your community, in your faith community, you're going to need something. And somebody in your network, maybe somebody in this room who you will meet today, has the answer. If when we break, you go outside, jump on your phone, talk to your best friend, run straight to your car, you're not going to have that opportunity to meet that person, to start that relationship. Long-term, mutually beneficial relationships have to start somewhere. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, I challenge you, before you leave the property here today, meet 1, 2, or 3 people who you've never met before. And just ask some questions. You're not going to have a love connection with everybody, that's great. But I will tell you, if I hadn't taken the time to meet that one person randomly, and we built a friendship, it wasn't like I met him once and he called me saying, hey, I called my cousin. But if I hadn't built that relationship, I'm sure we would have been fine with the doctor that we settled on. But when you have a need, and you've shown people that you're there to help them along the way, they'll call you at 1:30 in the morning. And they'll help you set up surgery 5 days later, across the country. If they know you care, they care. So as I wrap this up, I'd just like to tell audiences what we do. We feel very fortunate. Every time we look at Kate and her sister, we know we're fortunate. And I believe if you're fortunate, and we're all fortunate, you're going to land a great job, and life's going to get going, and it's going to be great. You're going to look around and go, how did it get so great? I'll tell you, when you're fortunate, you've got to find your way to give back and serve. And I do that from speaking for people like Kathy. I do that from being involved in different groups. But I also do it because 8 years ago, my wife said, what do we really do? And she challenged me. And my wife and I started the Thom Singer Endowment for Craniofacial Surgery and Research at both Dell Children's Hospital and now at Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. And we give a little piece, every time I'm paid to speak, we give a little piece of that speaking fee to those 2 endowments. 8 years later, that's grown to over $60,000. Now, I'll tell you, I'm not rich. We struggle. I have to pay tuition for my oldest daughter at the second most expensive college in America. Yay, thanks for that choice. I'm not wearing my Carnegie Mellon plaid socks. I usually wear my Carnegie Mellon socks to remind me how much money they get. Kate's going to probably try to top it. She's like, yeah, what's the most expensive? I'll go there. I don't come from a family that has their name on the wall of a hospital. We struggle to get by and make our life work. But we give $50 checks, $100 checks, $200 checks, $300 checks for over 8 years. And it's become a real thing. So you don't have to be rich to give back. You just have to have a generosity of spirit with your time, with your money, with your good vibes. And I challenge everybody, start small and just give. And it just all seems to work itself out. I mean, I started my business in the recession. I left the high-paying job, or it left me, and did this. We still gave. Even though we were broke and we hemorrhaged money for 3 years, we just gave little teeny pieces. And 8 years later, it's real money at those 2 hospitals. So I just share that. I call it compounded generosity. You don't have to give a giant amount. You just give a little bit throughout your lifetime. And it doesn't even have to be money. Just the love, support, and vibes. And it adds up to change lives. So everything I've talked about, it is a marathon, not a sprint. Anybody run marathons? Yeah, God love you. I don't. But the people who do, crazy people who do, tell me that somewhere around mile 17, they think what? But what do you think? You hit the wall. You're like, I could be in bed with a latte. Why am I doing this? And then what do you do next?
Just keep trucking on.
you just take one more step and keep going. Same thing is true with building your network and a brand. It's one step after one step, and you think, all these people, nobody's helping me. It's the next person you meet might be the one. You can't stop. You keep going day after day. You help, you serve, you show up, you meet, you follow up. Rinse and repeat. You just do. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much for listening. Please enjoy the book.